Hello everyone, I'm Jamie of greenteajamieri, and I wanted to share a little bit about the channel and what to expect moving forward. So I decided to start this channel to inspire and empower people to heal themselves holistically. This is a journey I've been on since as far back as I can remember. Probably my earliest memory was as a young teenager, maybe 14 years old. I happened upon my father's book called Back to Eden by Jethro Claus, which is a book about holistic healing, herbalism, home remedies. And I remember thinking, if I were ever to have any kind of serious ailment, or even not a serious ailment, but anything, this would be the route that I would take. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I did have a myriad of health issues brought on by the excessive use of antibiotics at an early age. I kept getting strep throat. And so for a full year or so as a child, I was on antibiotics. And that created gut dysbiosis, as is pretty common. I think I just happened upon Super Gut by Dr. William Davis, and I'm excited to share more about that with you all. But he discusses how oftentimes it just takes one round of antibiotics to rid us of key microbes that are essential for optimal health. So even as a child, I recognized I never had the energy levels of other people. And I'm not a jealous person, but I was jealous of people who seemed to have a lot of energy in their days. I even played basketball in high school, and I was pretty good, but for about 5 minutes. And it was evident early on that I didn't have the endurance, but I was always an overachiever and I always pushed myself. But as you age and you get older, it's a lot harder. Anyway, as my health began to deteriorate, I'm gonna say when I was nearing 40, it was really bad. I was sleeping like 11 hours a day, sleeping my life away, and I would have to schedule things so that if I did something today, I had to stay home tomorrow. So I would schedule events. I couldn't do 2 events back to back. And even my work, I didn't want to do more than 4 days a week. I worked as a bartender and a bar manager for a long time, despite having a degree in literature and psychology. I did work in my field in literature psychology for a while. But I actually did really well with bartending. I loved it. I got paid to make drinks and friends, but that's another story. So as my health was deteriorating, I went to many doctors, and they really did nothing for me. And it was really disappointing to have all these goals and dreams. I was about to start a quick and healthy food truck. I took a 4-month entrepreneurial course. And when I finally had the money, I realized I am not going to be able to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the commissary, load the truck, come back, and do this consistently. There's a lot of energy required for that kind of work. And I realized I have to get a grip and figure out how to heal myself. And so I joined a myriad of health forums online, and there was a comment that someone made about Kundalini breathwork. I had never heard of it before. I was intrigued, and I had subclinical hypothyroidism. And the doctor said even when your thyroid levels are slightly off, it can be felt dramatically. The thyroid affects every cell function in the body. And so I was intrigued by this woman's comment, and I got on YouTube and I started doing Kundalini breathing techniques. I was impressed. It gave me energy. There was a period where I was working a government position temporarily, and there was one week where we did 80 hours, or I did 80 hours that week. And I actually met up with a friend after work one day. I almost canceled because I think I was going on 2 hours of sleep. And I was sharing how impressed I was with the Kundalini breathwork and how it gave me energy. And I said, I almost canceled today, but I've been doing this work for a year, and if I cancel, I'm not sure even when I would be able to reschedule. So I pushed through. And I'm like, I'm surprised I even have any energy for this dinner right now. And it was because I had done Kundalini breathwork at lunch during my lunch hour on the rooftop. I was getting my sunshine, my vitamin D. I noticed the sunshine was another factor in my energy. It's like literally night and day on the days when I get exposure to the sun and the days when I don't. I'm currently living in North Carolina, and I moved down here about 5 years ago. And I remember when I first moved down here, I was going on hikes, exploring my new state, and my health felt swiftly improved. And I wasn't sure why. And the only difference was that I was getting out and about every day. Whereas in New York City, I was more in my apartment. I didn't have the luxury of just going on these nature hikes, and there are waterfalls at every turn where I live. So say that because the Kundalini breathwork was the beginning of magic, and transformations started to happen for me in my life. Actually, I was doing the Kundalini breathwork when I was in New York, and each session begins and ends with mantra. And one of the beginning mantras is the Adi mantra, which is Om Namo Gurudev Namo. And that is a mantra that connects you to the lineage of Ayurveda and your higher self and the tradition. And so it was fascinating because I didn't even realize that was what pulled me to this state that I had never been to. And it was this unshakable calling to just move here. I had no job, I had no friends. I didn't know I was going to wind up going to the Ayurvedic Institute that moved down here right after I moved down here. And it was kind of divinely orchestrated. So everybody thought I was a little crazy. It was a bit extreme. But it was like every cell in my body was shaking me, and I couldn't not listen. And so the week that I decided, after I was living here for a few months, that I was going to look into herbalism schools, I had always obsessively researched everything regarding health and holistic healing, and it was a passion of mine. And I always knew I wanted to start a vlog at some point. I actually wanted to write. I was a literature major, but everybody insisted that I could reach a wider audience with this forum, so here I am. So I interviewed Dr. Sarah Carson, and I can't wait to share that interview with you all, who is a doctor of Ayurveda, but I didn't know that she was a doctor of Ayurveda at the time. I thought she was an herbalist, and I later learned she was a doctor of herbalism, and I expressed to her my desire to begin studying herbalism, and she asked what kind of herbalism I wanted to study, and I hadn't gone far enough in my research to even be aware of the difference between Western herbalism and Eastern herbalism, or Ayurveda. And so I let her know that I wasn't sure yet, and she said, I think you would be interested in that. You might be interested in Ayurveda. So she expressed to me what it was, and I was blown away. I was so impressed with her intellect and her compassion and the way she described Ayurveda and how it treats the individual. So 3 different people can come to you with the same diagnosis and be given 3 different herbal formulas, because we look at the individual's constitution and their vitiations, not just a Western diagnosis. And so I remember during the course of the interview being so blown away. I thought, I wish I could study under the teacher that she studied under. Too bad he's in New Mexico. Well, unbeknownst to me, he had moved his school from New Mexico to Asheville, and neither one of us was aware of that during this interview. Well, 2 days later, a friend that I had never met in person, but we had a lot of mutual interests, and we were friends on social media, reached out to me and said, I'm also from New York, and I am moving to Asheville, and I would like to meet you. And so when we met, she shared with me that she moved to Asheville because her husband worked with Dr. Lodge, the doctor that I wanted so badly to study under. And she told me that the school was in the process of, opening in a few months. And I just realized it was destiny for me to go to the school. And that was what the calling was. That was why I had to move down here without knowing anybody, without having anything lined up, and just following a hunch. And the school was 15 grand. I had not been working for a while. I was living off of my savings. I didn't have the 15 grand to spend on the school. But I knew there was going to be, a way was going to be made. Like, my faith was that strong. I'm like this, I feel divinely supported on this journey. And the litany of synchronicities just were screaming at me that this was my Dharma. This was my destiny. This was my purpose. So she volunteered and told me, well, I know people. And I was I was so moved by that. I would never in a million years have asked for such a favor. But she said, well, I know people. So I felt like I had an in. I felt like things were lining up, and it was, So I went to visit the school. When I reached out to her, there was an open house. Before the open house, I sent her a message and I said, I'm interested in following you up on that offer. And she said, well, I don't know. I don't think they have any scholarships or financial aid. And my heart sank. I didn't understand why she volunteered. Nonetheless, I remember thinking I wasn't called here for no reason. With her assistance or without, this is happening. So I went down to the school. I shared my journey, the litany of synchronicities, and a way was made. But I prayed on it. And it's interesting because when I went to the school, I didn't really know what the curriculum was like. I knew I was going to study Ayurvedic herbalism. I did not know that I was going to study the Pranayama breathwork that I had been doing. I did not know that I was going to study Sanskrit and learn the power of the mantras. I did not know I was going to learn Ayurvedic cooking and yoga. It was a lot, and it was a beautiful bonus. And it's a blessing that I didn't know what I was getting into, because the program was very rigorous. Dr. Lad is not just an Ayurvedic doctor, he's an allopathic doctor. So he runs the school like a medical school would be in a way. He has high expectations of us. And I think it was a pretty competitive school, and not that we were competitive with one another, but we were just competitive with ourselves. And I remember thinking I was a phenomenal student, not to toot my own horn, but I graduated with the award for my major in literature. I graduated with honors in psychology, and I'm thinking this is going to be a breeze. I'll go to school, I'll work part-time, and it'll be fine. But some of those classes were from 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening, and then you're not done. You're going home to do homework and study for exams and projects, and later on in the school year, even clinicals. So it was intense. I did not have time even to work while I was in the program, and I knew I didn't have enough money to carry me throughout the rest of the year. But I figured I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Faith, has been the magic carpet that's carried me this far. So that was my journey, and most of my peers wanted to become Ayurvedic doctors or Ayurvedic practitioners, and my goal was always really to reach a wider audience and not to work with people one-on-one necessarily, although I have, but to spread this information through social media as I'm doing, and to expose people to the lineage that I was oblivious to only 6 years ago. I had been working with Kundalini breathwork, but I really wasn't familiar with the whole Ayurvedic scope and how that fell into it. And that's the other thing, like when I started doing the mantras back in New York before I moved down here, they were just creating some mystical, amazing experiences for me. And I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that the mantras were very powerful. And I needed to understand the science behind how they worked. And I remember saying out loud and even posting it on Facebook. Like, I know this works. I have no doubt I've experienced it firsthand. But I need to understand the science behind it. And 2 days later, I went to a bookstore, a thrift store rather, and in a sea of books, the width of maybe half of a New York City block from floor to ceiling, of all the books, the first book that popped out to me was this yellow book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is essentially the philosophy of the Indian culture and lineage that Ayurveda comes from. And that was no coincidence. When you are in alignment, when you are in sync with nature, the universe, the elements, the synchronicities become incessant and things line up. I think if I had planned this on an intellectual, logical level, it would have been harder. It would have been a longer process. I don't know if I would have necessarily studied here in Asheville with Dr. Lad, who is the most world-renowned, I think, in Ayurveda. He brought Ayurveda here from India in the 70s. People didn't really know what Ayurveda was before that. So to have the opportunity to study with such a phenomenal doctor was really a privilege. People came from Italy, Japan, all over the country, California, and moved here to study with this teacher, and it kind of was a gift from the universe that fell into my lap that I'm forever grateful for. And going back to the mantras, I later learned that one of the mantras that I was doing, Rama Da Sa Se Soham, one of the mantras that I was doing was a mantra for healing. And it was just so relaxing. I would take my Epsom salt baths regularly and set the ambiance, and I would do this mantra, and I just loved the sounds of it, the way it made me feel. I wasn't really necessarily doing it expecting results. I was doing it for the pleasure. And I later found out that that was Dr. Lad's favorite mantra. And he recommends it to clients often as a healing mantra. And so the mantra put me on this frequency that aligns me with the perfect teacher for me. So my goal with greenteajamieri is really to share all that I've learned, and I don't want to pigeonhole myself and make the channel solely about Ayurveda. I have friends that are homeopaths and functional doctors, classical Chinese medicine practitioners, and so I feel like we can learn from everyone in various lineages, and I think people have more access to information now than ever and are curious and are finding. There were nurses in my class at the Ayurvedic Institute, and actually there were doctors. There was one doctor in the class with me and another doctor in the class ahead of me, and it was fascinating to see that. And like I said, Dr. Lad is also an allopathic doctor, but he uses Ayurveda first and foremost. And so my goal and my desire is really to share the science behind these ancient Indian teachings. Like with mantra, for example, I think a lot of people think it's just woo-woo, but the sound creates these cymatic frequencies. They create these geometric yantra patterns that have an effect on the cell membrane. The cell membrane has sensors. And so as we are creating specific vibrations, it's altering the biochemistry within the body, and it's bringing harmony into maybe chaotic, dysfunctional cells. It's bringing harmony into the discord within our system. So that was something that I was so eager to learn more about. And so mantras become a really big part of my life. And there's specific mantras for everything, and I'll be talking about that in another video. This is just the introductory video, and I've been having some tech issues, so this was supposed to be a more polished version, but I think it's been slowing me down with getting my work out into the world, trying to have the right lighting. I was working on my home office, although this is a much better background, I think. And trying to make the videos more aesthetically pleasing. I've been filming, and I haven't been putting anything out into the world. And my goal is eventually to make this my full-time job and to have a real impact on the masses. I feel like people reach out to me often individually, like I'm in the middle of menopause, what can I do? Or my joints are aching, I'm dealing with arthritis, what can I do for my nervous system, dealing with either grief or stress, thyroid issues, and there's a lot that can be done, not just to manage, but to heal. So I am grateful that you tuned in, and I hope you subscribe. I will be editing and putting material out regularly from this day forward. And I'll be doing social medias for short forms, YouTube for long form videos, and pairing it with a Substack so that you can have specifics for certain, maybe you want a specific mantra, maybe you want a specific herbal blend, or you want to know where to order, certain herbs or oils. So I'll be pairing the Substack with the YouTube page. And yeah, thank you again for tuning in. And I'm eager to grow and perfect the channel, and it'll, I'm sure, improve in time.